The second episode of the new Sylvester Stallone series, Tulsa King, has dropped. I'm giving my thoughts and reactions right after the jump. Hello, everyone. Terrence here with Hollywood Already Did It. If you haven't already, go ahead, like, share, subscribe to the channel, ring that bell below, leave a comment. Anytime we have something, you will be among the first to know. This one's going to be spoiler. I didn't get to get into spoilers the first time, but now we are. What's interesting about this show, and how I've seen some people say that the tone of the show is all over the place, or tonally it doesn't mesh. What's interesting to me, when I start a new show, I don't go in with a preconceived notion of what the tone should be. I let the show sort of decide of like, oh, that's what the tone is, that's what the thing is, and I ride with it. I'm either in with it or I'm not. I think a lot of the shows that deal with serious content but have humor are some of my favorite shows, because I think when you humanize some of the dirtiness or the grindiness of the world, it makes it for a better situation, a better, more tangible, but also just a more heartfelt situation. I think Scrubs is one of those ones where I always think of like, oh yeah, there's comedy there, but when it gets serious, boy, does that get serious. This show's tone reminds me a lot of Out of Sight, the Elmore Leonard book, and the show Karen Cisco, which the character comes from Out of Sight, where crime is happening, but hijinks, sometimes comedy. There's moments of levity that happen around very serious situations dealing with crime. That's what this show feels like. So this is like Taylor Sheridan's sort of way of looking into an Elmore Leonard novel around the Out of Sight era. This episode begins with Dwight looking up his daughter. We ended the last episode with him staring outside and saying he wants to find his daughter. That's the only thing he's kind of hoping for. The family that he thought he had, the mob family, has turned away from him. So now he's trying to reach out and look for his current daughter, his real daughter, Christina. So he's searching online, which is interesting. I'm assuming that Tyson helped him out here, but he's searching online to kind of find his daughter. He comes up with one of those search engines that says, "Hey, Christina Manfredi, hyphenated, whatever her married name is." But to get more information, you need to have a credit card. And so the majority of this episode is spent with Dwight trying to be able to go find and get a credit card. It's hard to get a credit card when you don't have legal businesses and you just came from jail. But between that and then there's he's trying to pay to send the package off back to New York. Between those two, he needs a credit card for payment. He realizes that I gotta have one, and there's no really no other options. In between him searching for a card, there's a moment, and it's important because it sort of comes in the back end of this. This scene, however, plays for levity. Dwight is in the middle of walking through Tulsa, and he's getting the wait sign. He's like, I'm not waiting, because you know that thing's wait before you cross the street. He's like, I've waited all my life. But he gets to a point where he's in the center of basically Tulsa, since it looks like their center square. And he runs into a homeless woman who says that if you sit in the center spot in this thing, it's just like the center of the universe, and whatever you say there, no one else can hear you. I feel like she's playing a rib. We've seen this on type of shows. It'll be like, wink, wink. Is it real? Is it not? Is she just pulling her leg? But he stands there and he says some stuff, and she pretends to not hear him. But it kind of gives him the thought of, hey, maybe this thing might work. And that's just to tuck that away, hold on to that, because that's going to play into the coda at the end of this episode. All in all, Tony and Dwight need to find him a legitimate way to get a credit card. And Tony lets him know, like, hey, you might not be able to get a credit card because you got to fill out a whole bunch of paperwork and do all this stuff, but we can get you a debit card. To do that, you got to set up a bank account. They go to a bank, try to set up a bank account, but my man don't have an ID. His ID is expired back in 1998. So there's nothing he can do. He's like, I'm not trying to rent a car, but he doesn't really understand that to open up a bank account, you need to have that. And so he needs to get an ID. So that means he needs to go get his ID updated. He seems very aggravated by all the legitimate things you have to do to get these things. Like, well, it was so much better when it was illegal. He has a line in there that says cash is king. But in his day, yes, cash, that was always a money trail. It was easier to sort of keep things off the books. Here, it's not as easy. You got to have a bank account to do things. You have to have a credit card, because most places don't take cash. Everything's debit or credit card. He manages to go, he goes and tries to take the test. gets the line, tries to get an appointment for a driving test. And then she's like, it's going to be 5 weeks. And he throws her some cash. The one time the cash actually does work in this situation. Throws her some cash. And she's like, hey, oh, look at that. All of a sudden, a new date is opened up for like in a couple of days. So that speeds that process up. And then in the meantime, in the interim, she gives him a permit. And that permit, she was like, hey, can I open up a bank account or does this work as ID? She's like, anything you want to do with an ID, you can do with that permit. Off to the races, goes back to the bank, opens up that account, and he is going to be getting his credit debit card in the mail momentarily. While that's happening, Vince, the capo that Dwight punched in the first episode, has come back to Chicky and has told Chicky that, hey, we got to do something about it. Like this, he just punched a capo. I can barely talk. I got my jaw wired. I'm a made man. Like, we need to do something about this. There needs to be some type of message sent. And my man was, Jay's like, he's a capo too. So, like, I mean, do you want to do something? He's like, you trying to kill him? He's like, yeah, I want to kill him. He's like, hold on, that's not going to work. So Chicky goes back to talk to his father. And then he calls Dwight. He lets Dwight know, like, hey, how's it going out there? Dwight's like, hey, I'm making moves. I'm doing some things. And then Chicky brings up the Vince situation. Seems to be a very contentious situation. Dwight doesn't really want to show Vince any type of respect or any type of love. But Chicky's basically saying, like, hey, you need to make this right. You need to do something. And so the tax that they've sort of pressed on is that we're taxing you $100,000. You do that and we'll wipe the slate clean. Dwight doesn't say yes or no. He simply says, like, hey, if I send something in the mail, you might want to check to make sure that it's not taking. Which is not an endorsement of saying, hey, I'm going to send you that cash. So that situation in New York seems to be escalating, and now I would imagine that they're going to be coming, at the very least, Vince seems to be sort of running off the hill and kind of doing his own thing. He, in a way, is going to try to come and handle that situation. Some of the surrounding folks of the town are starting to realize that that Dwight, also known as Ike to some, is back. Manny, the person that sort of started all of this thing with Dwight, and also seems to be in hiding in Tulsa. That seems to be where people go to hide. Is made aware that he's back, and Manny starts freaking out and he finds the hotel that Dwight is staying at. He starts sort of kind of getting some information, and he's afraid that he's there specifically to put a hit on Manny. Mind you, we all know that Dwight has no idea he's there, so he's going to make his presence known, and then thus probably will send him after him. But now you have at least two people who have something to say to Dwight and come after Dwight. And so the peaceful, loving, just go ahead and get my drug thing going may come to a bit of a rude awakening with all the people that are sort of conversing and trying to end his life. We also have the woman that he slept with, the FBI agent Stacey Beal, who I very much feels like the Karen Cisco sort of aspect of the out of sight comparison that I made. And she's calling around to sort of get some more information on Dwight, to get a little bit more into his jacket. And she learns that, he was in jail for prison for multiple years, and that he never snitched. And for a bit, she's like, oh, I have to admire his integrity. Yeah, he's a cold-blooded murderer. He's killed at least two people. One he's actually killed, and the other he was a self-defense while in prison. So she's sort of like, I admire his integrity. But she lets on to the friend, and the friend kind of reads it like, oh, well, you did more than this isn't just information. When you did more to them. And she just says, I just had coffee, but we all know they did the do. She also has a therapy session, which kind of leads a little bit more into her background, where she's been married at some point. It seems to be either separated or divorced for at least a year, and is sort of trying to figure herself out again. Has not really dated, but has, messed around. And alcohol seems to be an Achilles heel for her. Tyson has a great relationship with his father, but his father's a plumber. He works 9 to 5, that everyday job, and Tyson kind of doesn't want to live that life, it appears. And so, but Tyson's and his dad have a good relationship, and his dad is just like, hey, you shouldn't be working for this gangster. You should be going to college, what about school and all this stuff. And my man's like, are you serious? You know how much money I'm making? Like, this should be the school you want me to learn from. He's teaching me about life and teaching me about business. And it's unfortunate because I feel like Tyson is going to get kind of caught in the crossfire of some dangerous stuff that's running. Right now, it's all fun and games. You're driving this man around. You're doing drug transactions. You're doing guns. But once weapons and bullets start flying, are you going to be as calm? And will your dad be as understanding of the situation? He's not getting sleep. He's staying up at night watching Tyson as he comes in and out. He's very concerned about what's happening with his boy, where Tyson is just in the moment and living for the now. Dwight goes to Bodie because he wants to get some more cash and function coming in. So he goes to Bodie and says, "Hey, take me to one of these farms so we can get a little bit more piece of the pie." And so Bodie, Dwight, and Tyson drive out to this farm in God knows where. And the farm belongs to a man named Jimmy the Creek, who is a bouncer, if you will, named Badface. Badface and Dwight seem to be about to go to blows at the very beginning of this, but then Dwight comes in and sort of calms everything down. And then Dwight and Jimmy sit down and sort of have a negotiation. What Dwight believes is a negotiation. What Jimmy is like, no, this is what I'm coming with. The plans and whatever it was Jimmy thought he was going to have, I don't know if he ever thought he was going to be in a world where he went to somebody toe-to-toe like Dwight. But Dwight gets him to come down on it. And then they sort of have a good old weed session. Because the whole time Dwight is just chewing away and just slapping up some apricot jelly that has weed in it. Bodie's response is like, well, we're at a weed farm. But it doesn't bother him, and we just see an entire situation where Dwight kind of goes back home and is enjoying some weed and having a kind of good time with his crew that he's assembling. So then the next couple of days, Dwight's debit card does come, and he immediately rips it open and goes upstairs and punches that into the very beginning of the episode, that website that he was searching for Christine. And he puts all his information in, and he gets the address and phone number. He gets the phone number. The address just says it's New York, but it doesn't give the actual location, but the phone number is there. She calls it, and he calls the number. Christine's husband picks up. And he identifies himself as Christine's dad. And the husband willingly goes to go get Christine. And then he comes back and says that Christine doesn't want to speak to you. I'm sorry. Dwight can hear that there are kids in the background. So he kind of asks, it gets blown over, but he sort of asks, like, hey, are those kids that you and Christine had together? Because, like, they would be his grandkids. But he sort of blows by that. And he's like, hey, look, can you leave? I just want to hear her voice. And Christine does come on the phone and says, hey, happy you can hear my voice now. And he's like, can I see you? And then she hangs up. There's a very contentious relationship. She doesn't want any parts of him, and it has been said earlier in this that he pushed her away because he didn't want to hurt her. He didn't want her to keep coming in and hurt her. Because there's a moment when Stacy comes to sort of let him know that I am an FBI agent. I wasn't playing you, and I didn't know that beforehand. But anytime somebody like yourself comes to our town, it automatically flags. And I just want you to know that. And she starts questioning him about Christine and questioning him about the mobs. And it's stuff that he kind of blows off. He's like, if you're coming here in the capacity of your job, then there's nothing I can do for you. But she ends it with saying, hey, if you ever get caught in a jam, I won't be able to help you. And he's like, understood. Like, I didn't expect you to. After the phone call that he has with Christine, though, he is a bit broken up. And so he goes back to the place that is actual landmark that is known in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the center of the universe. And he goes there and he just has the conversation out into the abyss where he claims and he says that I said that I pushed her away and I told her not to come for her, but I did it for myself. I did it because it was too hard on me to see her. And she seemed to have been perfectly fine with it at that point, from what I understand, but he did it so that he wouldn't have to deal with seeing her grow up, because it was very difficult for him. And he basically quit on her, and that was he was saying he was sorry. It's what I talk about when I said the tone works for me, is that when you have these moments of levity and you have these moments of joking or him having weed with his friends on the way back, when you have a moment like this at the very end that hits so well and you just knock the emotion out of the park, it hits a lot harder. And that was very heartfelt and warm. And Stallone, for what you say about him being that that acting range with Arnold and all of those guys. He's one of the best. He is really good at what he does, and he can emote better than pretty much all of those '90s action heroes kind of combined. Really good episode. I would love a little bit more. This one was about establishing his relationship with his daughter, and how bad it is, and then sort of him further setting up his seeds there to sort of allow him to do the business that he wants. But I do think it's important, sooner rather than later, that we get some type of threat to occur, because this is a crime story. Some type of crime needs to happen so that we feel the walls coming in on Dwight a little bit, whether it be from Vince and the Capo, Vince the Capo and Chicky, or if it's from Stacy, or if it's from Manny. Wherever it comes from, I don't care, but I think there needs to be a level of a threat that comes by. Otherwise, the show becomes kind of like more into the comedy realm than into the drama realm. And I think we want to have that healthy balance. So put the seeds of some type of thing going on, but let's get there, because I don't know how many episodes it has, but I can't imagine it goes further than eight to 10. What did you guys think about this episode called Center of the Universe? Like I said, I'm behind, so I just watched this episode recorded, and now I'm going to go watch the other one and record the second one. So that's why I have no idea what happened in episode 3. But I will shortly, and you'll see that video coming right after this one. Go ahead and leave your thoughts and comments about episode 2 of Tulsa King in the comments below. If you haven't already, you can follow us on Twitter at HollywoodADI. You can hit us up on email at HollywoodAlreadyDidIt@gmail.com. We also have a podcast with the same name. That's on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, any other place podcasts. We're there. And like always, I got my ticket. You got yours.